Anyone else? All right, let me close the public portion. And David?
I just want to make a comment about the FAR aspect, because I do really sympathize with Marina and Chris. I think that double height space, especially if you've got a mezzanine, can be a real design feature. But I think we have to keep in mind that there's a trade-off as well, because these older homes in these same neighborhoods were not built with double height spaces. It's not a typical feature. And so, by definition, and by the way, the older houses often don't max out the FAR on the lot. So if we allow these double height spaces, while it's a benefit in terms of creative design, it's going to create structures that are out of keeping with the other structures in the neighborhood. And that's what this ordinance change is trying to accomplish. So we have to sort of weigh those pros and cons. There's no way you can have both, where you can have these double height spaces and have the new construction fit in massing-wise in these neighborhoods.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, please.
This is just one thought. I'm sure this is a substantive change, but maybe to address part of this is that if the house is a small house in total, and I don't know what the right size is, if it's under, say, 2,000 square feet, then maybe it's exempt from this. I'm not sure what impact that would have, but if it's, I think part of what this is trying to address is, like, I understand the creativity that's needed inside, especially in a small house, but I agree with David that it has an impact on the street as well. And if the main issue is dealing with a small house when the space is tight, maybe there's a way to do both where, I don't know. That was just my thought in trying to hear everything. Yeah, Julie?
I really like that idea, because I do see smaller homes being penalized in ways that, just make it harder. And I do think these are really targeted at those, 5,000 square foot plus houses. And David's right. I mean, you can't have everything, but maybe by exempting a smaller house, we can kind of target it to the areas we want to go to, rather than penalizing somebody really stuck on a small lot trying to be creative.
It seems like a change, so it doesn't seem like something you can do this month.
Ms. Ullman?
I guess I am troubled by the cathedral ceiling one. And I think the idea in the beginning was to find a way to discourage houses that are too large. It's actually useful for us to have an architect give us intuitive or counter examples, because we're looking at a bulk, a street, a neighborhood, and trying to find ways of moderating what residents and we sometimes see as excessive building, and we don't always think about the other consequences. So I thought your points were well made. I am uncomfortable, I will say, with where we are on that particular change. The other three I don't have any problem with. I'm not terribly concerned about the parking. I think the garage, the way we have stated the changes regarding the garage makes sense both for the public and for me. I think the prevailing setback makes sense as long as the wording is clear enough for everybody to understand it. And I think the front porch one works. The only one I feel personally ambivalent about, because I think I don't understand all the implications of it, is the FAR for the cathedral ceilings, and I just put that out there.
Right, can I ask Mr. Bridger a question that came up in the council meeting when this was first brought up? How did we end up on stairways which have loft space above them, or the space for a stairway? I think, is that is counted at each floor as...
The stairway twice. I mean, it becomes like a geometry question with every house, and the model is like water, you know. Anytime there's any area to increase FAR, they do it. So we, as a matter of interpretation and policy, we count stairways twice.
Okay. I think that was one of the things someone asked before. Yes, Tim?
I would certainly support Liz's idea of exempting smaller houses from the cathedral ceiling regulation, and as such, we might want to just pull that from what we send back to council, recommend that the other pieces go through. And I wanted to address the notion that this is sort of being rushed through at the end of the year. This has been a pretty long and deliberate process from my perspective. You know, nothing moves quickly in Princeton, and this was no exception. I mean, this process began in the spring, I believe, in March or so. It was definitely...
I think it was even earlier than that, because some of the slides have 2014 on them.
Yeah, where the first discussions were had, and I think that, all due respect to the builders and architects in the room, that there are many people in town who are welcoming these changes and are asking for them. Certainly, we need to have well-thought-out proposals put before council, but I disagree with the notion that this is sort of a post-election day rush to get something through. So if we took the three that I think they're consensus on the board and more or less in the room, and recommended those to council, and then sent back the cathedral ceiling piece for further study, I think that we would have a nice compromise there.
I would just, I agree with what Mr. Quinn said. I would just add two clarifications to that. So one is, I think already staff took down the note of cleaning up the language for the prevailing setback, and then the other was clarifying the definition of a garage. And I'd want those both to go in our note back to council.
Garage versus carport, and is it in the code anywhere where a garage is defined?
There's a definition of garage in both codes, but it speaks about a garage is an accessory structure, so it needs to be tweaked, and it has to have some relation, I guess, to the front door.
Okay.
Or the width.
Thanks.
And you're all agreed that our recommendation would be to hold back on the cathedral ceiling? I just want to remind you that this went through discussion last year in December. The cathedral ceiling did, so this is at least the second time around for it in my recollection.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with not making a recommendation on the cathedral ceilings, but I do want to just emphasize to the members of the board that this ordinance in no way forbids cathedral ceilings. It's just saying how large of a house that you can have on a lot of a given size. But, you know, if you're willing to give up floor area, you can have your cathedral ceiling, and you can have all the architectural creativity you want. So we're not really talking about forbidding architectural creativity. We're just limiting sizes of structures.
All right, so I gather the recommendation is as expressed, that it's the first three with the language changes Mr. Sullivan has written
I
down?
think we have pretty clear notes. I do want to caution you, I'm a little worried about how we're going to define garages, because as pointed out tonight, on the really small lots where the facade is mostly garage, that's going to be a problem in terms of how we define it. I can see, that's why I said tonight we're not going to solve it, but as you think about it, if you have a 30 or 40-foot wide lot, the John Witherspoon neighborhood, and they want to have a garage, or they want to have the parking, the entire facade is a garage. And so we're going to have to be careful as to how we word it, so I don't think we want to prohibit that. So I'll start giving it some thought. What I'm doing, I guess, is inviting all of you to give it a little bit of thought as well. And if you have some ideas, let me know, because it's not going to be an easy solution when we start modifying it.
My only suggestion would be to ask Mark Keener if they can point to other code, because it seems like we're not the first ones that have had this idea.
All right, do we need a motion on this, since it's going? Tim made a motion, right?
Yes.
And there was a
Consider
second?
it moved.
Okay, and there was a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, and seconded by Ms. Ullman. All those in favor of recommending the first three items with the changes to council and asking them to hold the cathedral ceiling section for future study?
Can I make, I'm sorry, but can I make an amendment, which is partly in response to what Lee is saying, so that I think that I'd like to recommend that in the event that it becomes difficult to define garages in such a way that we can accomplish what we're trying to do, that council consider postponing the garage item as well, to investigate the potential of regulating the width of the garage relative to the overall width of the building as a possible solution to that. So, I know, if Alan were here, he would word that for me, but,
But wait, I thought, aren't we going to say something like the front door has to be, that it's in relation to the front door?
I don't know if we will be able to, because that's the problem on a smaller lot. If you're saying we don't want garages on the smaller lot, then it's not a problem. But I worry where you have a 40-foot wide lot, okay, and you need 8 and 20, you need 8-foot minimum side yard setback, total of 20. The house is getting very narrow, and if you look, what happens on these smaller lots is everybody wants a garage, so they get a one-car garage, and that's the facade. If we limit the percentage of the garage to the facade of the building, you may be saying to people on narrow lots that they're not going to have a garage. And that's not what we can discuss that, and we've had some, but that was not where we were going with this amendment.
and I want to explain a little bit more about that, because, Jenny, if you push the front door up to the front of the garage on a narrow lot, you're going to have this long hallway from the front door to where you actually get to the living space, which would be behind the garage. If the lot's too narrow to put living space next to the garage, then requiring the front door to be in the same plane as the garage door is going to lead to this bizarre long hallway, long entry hallway from the front door to the actual living space. So that's the reason why you end up with a setback front door and on a narrow lot, and some of the complication that Lee is talking about. So I do think that, I guess the bottom line is, I'm saying I think that the garage piece of the ordinance also may require further study, just like the FAR piece may require further study.
But I feel like we're not really, then we're just going to end up with garages right on the, that we don't want that way. I mean,
Well, again, it's a question of lot size and actually the size of the house. I mean, this works for certain size lots and larger lots, but it's not going to work for the smallest ones. So, what do you want to do? We have a motion and a second. Do you want to recommend further study for that, or do you want to? Because this is going to be a lot of wordsmithing in 1 week for staff.
Well, I would recommend on the wordsmithing piece that we go back to Mark Keener and the consultants.
Okay.
Because we're not we shouldn't be
No, we're
reinventing the
not.
wheel here. And we keep reading about all these other communities, and this is one of the first ordinances they pass. And it's not like Princeton has smaller lots than a lot of the other towns that are also dealing with this. So I like how David put it, where if we have trouble getting language before it goes back to council, then we caution council that they may want to take another look. But I don't know if we want to preemptively say hold, because there might be a solution that's out there that
Yeah, but,
will,
I mean,
I
I
don't
think
know,
we all found a
magically
certain
solve
amount of virtue in this, and I think that probably with the right wording and we're looking at it the right way, we could. I will say, David, that in looking at ordinances from other places and the problems people have had with them, I asked Lee about this one this afternoon. A lot of places found that people were solving, as the anti-snout house ordinances came in, people were solving this problem by making the forward garage and then bringing a porch out so that it was an even facade from the garage door across the porch, and it got rid of that long hallway along the garage and put people right into the living space from the porch. And there seemed to be quite a number of developments in say, Ohio and Indiana where this was the solution to anti-snout ordinances.
So as Liz was saying, that may be the solution that can be put in place before the council meeting, so we don't have to recommend against the garage piece of the ordinance. We just have to express, because we're just making a recommendation. We're not passing anything here.
That's right.
So I think what we want to recommend to the council is that we have some reservations about the wording the way it is now, and, the record shows exactly what our reservations are. But if those reservations can be resolved with some minor tweaking of the language between now and the council meeting, we'd support it.
Proceed with caution.
Right. So maybe you should just call the roll on this recommendation, and we'll, because we do have,
Just a moment. Is the maker of the motion going to add that? And then is the seconder also going to add that?
So I would add language that we're recommending the garage with anticipating additional language that clarifies what David was trying to say.
Right.
and you were the seconder, right?
Sure.
I don't know if I'm as good as Alan in summarizing. I think there were a couple of comments that there seemed to be consensus on. So it's section 2, dealing with porches. I think we were going to call it front porches as opposed to porches. And then 2, dealing with garage. The board felt the need to either define the front facade or have language regarding the front door. I'm not quite certain how we're going to say it, but that there is concern with how this regulation will be put in effect, in particular with narrower lots, where the garage becomes the front facade. What I thought the board's concern was that, as shown on some of the slides, the front facade can be the garage, and to a certain extent, I think you want to avoid that, but it becomes problematic as you look at narrower lots where maybe they don't have an option. So the language needs to be adjusted, and we'll talk with Mark Keener from RBA to see if we can come up with that. But just to share with council, I think your concern on the regulation for garages was primarily twofold in that how it would affect narrower lots, and two, on larger ones, to ensure that the front facade not be just those garage doors, which is what we saw. Then in section 4, for mean prevailing front setback, we would add mean prevailing minimum front setback. Was there a consensus to do that as well?
And that was the borough language, was it?
Yeah, we would do that. No, actually, that minimum was never in either one. Was it in? No, it was not in the former borough either. I mean, that's what Derek was saying. For the last 10 years, we haven't had it. But if it clarifies it, that's fine. I don't know whether you wanted to recommend or suggest that, whether they do it in this ordinance or consider it for a future amendment, that the cathedral space being counted twice would only be would not include houses under 2,000 square feet. I think that's a better solution than if you were to say not the first 200 square feet, because that isn't going to do what we want. But if the concern is smaller, I thought Marina's exhibits are good. Maybe if we had the actual square footage so that you could graphically see it. But I don't know if there was consensus for that, if it's not a substantive change, and that you can word it so that consideration should be given to amending it in the future for the 2,000 square feet. And in the interim, I can talk to the municipal attorney to give her a heads up and get her thinking as to whether or not that's substantive or clarifying.
How did you, I don't know, oh, sorry.
I didn't make that comment to generate another conversation. I just wanted to make sure that the maker of the motion and the seconder would be on record as having that as a concern from this body, not to have another discussion, because obviously we can't do that. We can't clarify tonight. That's the only reason I made that. So if we could just move on, he will pass those concerns on to council, who will make the final decision. And all of that, some of that may be cleared up in the interim.
Well, I don't know how big a 2,000 square foot house is, if that's really small. I don't know. I don't know how, I'm really bad with not knowing. I don't know what my house is.
The first slide Lee showed us said that the average house in 73 was 1,660 square feet. So 2,000 is not a small house by
Bigger than
Princeton's.
average. So shouldn't it be
It's bigger than the
smaller?
average from back then.
Shouldn't our number be smaller than 2,000?
No, I think probably a small house now is about 19.
But this is why it is a substantive change, and it really, I don't see how it can be done in December.
Yeah, it's been pulled from the motion.
Oh, right. It's pulled, anyway, okay.
Okay.
But
Tim,
point's well taken.
didn't your motion, however, exclude the
Yes.
recommendation?
Yeah, that's right, so forget it.
And so,
But your point's well taken, Jenny, about we're going to have to define what a small house is eventually, and greater minds than mine will offer us a lot of input into that, but it's not part of the current motion.
okay, I just want, if I'm going to revise or change my second, I want to be sure we're still
seconding?
on track.
Okay.
A little difficult, but I think I am, and
Are we all agreed on this? Now, would you just run down the roll, please?
Ms. Capizoli,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Ms. Crummiller,
Yes.
Mayor Lempert. Yes. Mrs. Trotman,
Yes.
Mrs. Ullman,
yes.
Mrs. Gunning,
Yes.
Mr. Quinn,
Yes.
Mr. Williamson.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for coming and helping us with our discussion. And I think now we should move